order. Thank you. First order of business is approval of the minutes from April 14th. No, if everyone's had a chance to review those. Yet this morning, did not see anything, but it doesn't mean I did miss something. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Bill?
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Baxmeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Aye.
Mr. Gripe?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Economic Development Area Updates, Mr. Shalio.
We'll start with Chris, no budget.
Mr. Brown.
So attached, we've got all of the budgets for all of the fund years and the budget narrative. Usually I like to highlight some of the kind of the big expenses, if you will. Fund 4302, well, let's start with Wyatt EDA, the Pierce Road Extension Study, and we actually did our first comp plan payment for REA. So we're moving both of those forward. I think there's a packet here for the Pierce Road study. 4302, again, continued financial and legal services for Project Honeysuckle as we move towards getting that project going. Our final expenses for the Olive Township Fire Department were paid out. So we've met our $650,000 obligation for that project. From 4303, had a couple small expenses for the Nespajani Ditch as we look at some future projects going out in IEC Site 1. Along with finalizing some of the Inwood Road, Strawberry Road Bridge and culvert replacements. And that was a pretty big ticket item at around $600,000 for that. Dam General EDA, kind of the typical Capitol Avenue Dragon Trail path, which I believe is just about ready to move forward with that project. And then some demolition services regarding that Area 51 home near the Elm site. Northwest Cleveland EDA's continued work on Cleveland Road, on Old Cleveland Road, related to the holiday project. And then 4403, some of the TIF reporting services that Steve Dalton typically does. And then again, legal expenses related to some of the airport stuff and some of the work with county and MACOG regarding a trail study down by Potato Creek. So any questions? Happy to answer them.
Thank you. Hearing none. Let's move on.
So item 3A2 in your packet is a professional service agreement with Compass Asset Management. And Compass Asset Management is a division of Berkshire Hathaway that we've worked with since 2017. They provide real estate services for us for a variety of things, different than the work that Steve Hora does for us. So in a lot of cases, if we're doing property acquisition, we have to do relocation. If we do some of the buying in some county projects, they provide some additional services for us. So for example, Compass Asset Management is involved in helping with some relocation and some purchasing of property near the Juvenile Justice Center. So they do work not only for the Redevelopment Commission, but also for the larger county as a whole. So the proposal before you today is a contract. It mirrors the contracts we've had since 2017. And it's a $9,000 flat fee and an additional cost related to land acquisition specifically, either for options or for acquisition. We'd ask for your approval of this contract. Again, it's a flat fee of $9,000. And then the additional fees are part of contracts for purchase of properties if they're involved in those acquisitions. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer them.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion for approval.
Is there a second for this agreement?
I'll second.
All right, thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Gillian?
Aye.
Mr. Baxmeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow?
Yes.
Mr. Gripe?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
So item 3B1 is resolution 2022-05 And this is a resolution between the redevelopment commission regarding the transfer of real property from the town of New Carlisle. So the town of New Carlisle acquired a piece of property adjacent to their water treatment plant at the northwest corner of Edison and Walnut. Property was acquired as part of the St. Joe Energy Center project, and the property was actually acquired for future transfer to the redevelopment commission for the development of a rail corridor into the IEC. We've held on doing this acquisition until we knew that we needed to move forward with the development of the rail corridor. So this is the first of 3 properties that need to be acquired in that corridor. This we'll have a purchase agreement, hopefully 2 purchase agreements for the other 2 pieces of property here within the next month or 2 months. So the property transfer here today is really just a governmental transfer between 2 governmental agencies, Town Council of New Carlisle Redevelopment Commission. The cost, the average appraised value of the property is $19,500. And I would be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
This is the property we talked about in the last 2 meetings. I remember this last one I went before, when we were laying out the whole.
Yes, yep, yeah. And if you, there's a map in the packet. It is a triangle that is less than an acre in size. It is really, and it was actually when they built the fencing for the water treatment plant, the fence was actually put up along that diagonal property line in anticipation of this transfer. So it, just one more thing we get to mow, but it's part of this future development project.
When did we appraise this?
We appraised it. Let's see, we're in April, no, we're in May. I think it was appraised last fall. When we appraised that, we appraised the property immediately north of it, and then we reappraised the property north of that. So we appraised these 3 properties, I believe, all fall last year.
And from a legal perspective, because it's a transfer for 2 governmental entities, we're actually not even required to do the appraisal, but we wanted to do the appraisal to make sure that
How would we have known what to pay?
the statute allows the governmental entities to decide the purchase price or no purchase price, should they so decide.
Okay. Is it zoned commercial?
It's actually zoned industrial.
Oh,
So it's, yeah, so it was zoned as an industrial piece of property, again, less than an acre, non-buildable, but for this little piece of track that'll ultimately go through there.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? I move to approve. Thank you, Jason. Is there a second? Second.
You have a motion and a second. Mr. Gillian,
Yes.
Mr. Baxmeyer,
yes.
Mr. Critchlow,
Yes.
Mr. Gripe,
Aye.
and Mr. Jordan.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Yeah, so this is Sean Klein, IPG staff.
Stand up, introduce yourself to the team.
Well, you guys are
Come
doing it pretty
on.
casually, so. Sean Klein, I'm with IPG staff up on the 11th floor. So this is a proposal from Kendrick Keys Collaborative to develop a zoning overlay district for the Indiana Enterprise Center. This would then be adopted by the town of New Carlisle in their zoning ordinance, and then the county council into the county zoning ordinance. And the purpose of this overlay district is really to just give substance and force to the assurances that the county offered throughout the public processes related to the IEC, namely that it would be an aesthetically superior industrial development that really takes into consideration protection of sensitive environmental resources, agricultural lands, and just really tries to mitigate the impact on the general community. So by putting this into the zoning ordinance, we'll have predictable standards that developers can use, and it'll help the staff when reviewing development for the IEC. We did receive estimates from 3 firms, Kendrick Keys, GRW, and American Structure Point. The price of these proposals was pretty consistent across the board, ranging from $16,640 to $20,000. We believe that Kendrick Keys had the most robust understanding of the task and will provide the best product for us. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
This is Tom. I'm not sure I understand the need for that and the cost justification. Could you go into a little more detail, please?
Sure. Well, again, a lot of the need stems from what the county promised as far as what this development's going to look like. Our current development standards for the broader industrial district really don't speak to a lot of the things that we want to accomplish, specifically with regard to the IC in terms of, mitigation of impacts through heightened landscaping, building placement, trail connections, that sort of thing. And really, you want to put this in the zoning ordinance so that it has the full force of the ordinance, and so staff can actually enforce it when they're reviewing these proposals. And it also was kind of necessitated by resolutions that were passed by the county, the town of New Carlisle, and Olive Township to develop these design guidelines and standards.
Tom, this is Bill. I just as a follow-up to that, yeah, resolution 2020-11, which is in the packet, is one of the 4 resolutions that was passed by it was the redevelopment commission, the board of commissioners, the town council in New Carlisle, and Olive Township board of trustees. One of the provisions in that section 5 specifically, one of the requirements of this partnership was that we would do design guidelines and standards as well as permitted use documentation. So this is just kind of hitting that point. There were 9 section points that we had agreed to amongst the 4 parties, and this is just one that still was kind of left hanging that needed to be resolved.
Right, so the New Carlisle Council is all on board with this?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Now, will this be control, like, now forgive me if this is a dumb question, is this gonna be like more of like the designs of the buildings that we would have a say over, or like the layout of the landscape that they're building on?
That's, all going to be part of it.
Okay, so they could
Yeah.
just throw up like an ugly box building.
Correct. There'll be architectural standards, building placement standards, landscaping, screening, everything.
Thank you.
Any further comment or questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
I would move to approve.
There is second for the motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Gillian,
Aye.
Mr. Baxmeyer,
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow,
Yes.
Mr. Greip,
Aye.
and Mr. Jordan.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next 2 items on the agenda relate to the disposition of a piece of property at 56275 Snowberry Road. This is a piece of property that the redevelopment commission acquired on behalf of the board of commissioners. We did this in 2020. This was originally going to be part of a realignment of the entrance corridor into the IEC. As we've worked with the state of Indiana on State Road 2 and Larison improvements and other improvements in that area, keeping the alignment is the preferred plan. So at some point, this could be deemed as excess property. We do have an interested party in the property. We were required to get 2 disposition appraisals to dispose of property. So the proposals here today, one is from Iverson Grove in the amount of $2,000. The other is from Appraisal Services, Inc., and it's in the amount of $15,000 or $1,500. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those about items 2 and 3.
Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? I'll make the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Just for clarification of the record, the motion is for approval of both appraisals. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Gillian, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Baxmeyer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Critchlow,
Yes.
Mr. Greip,
Aye.
and Mr. Jordan.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I'm going to ask that we move item C1 down. We have a Linda Rogers, Senator Linda Rogers is going to join us. There is a family here to talk on that item, in support of that item. But Senator Rogers is coming from meeting to meeting, and so she should be here shortly. So if we can skip this one, move down to the next couple. Item 2 on that is a project update. In your packet is a map of the Pioneer Rail Corridor. Pioneer operates the Elkhart Western Railroad line along or just north of McKinley. We earlier this year had supported a Chrissy grant application, a rail improvement application that they had submitted. Originally, that project was going to support rail improvements at Cedar Trail and Birch Road. Pioneer, through some work that they're doing at Elkhart, received some additional funding from INDOT through their rail division. They decided to improve Birch Road based on traffic that they have on this line, but traffic also at this intersection. So they're moving ahead on their own expense on improving Birch Road. The Chrissy application, if approved, they believe it'll be approved, will then support improvements at Apple Road and Cedar Trail later this year or early next year. So this is one of these where it's kind of a nice win. We improved in partnership with them Asher Road and Bittersweet last year. So getting Birch done, and then the other 2 the following year or shortly yet this year is a win for that corridor. So I wanted to give the commission that as an update. And then so that's Pierce Road. And then Chris, I would have the next item on the agenda.
So Bill, with that, did we commit any money for that?
So we did, we committed match money, and I believe it was $200,000 for the Chrissy grant.
250. I think each crossing was 125.
Yeah.
Is what they were anticipating. So
We didn't spend it. We didn't spend it.
budgeted.
No.
You just budgeted
We just
it.
budgeted for.
What are you gonna do with that money instead?
Well, we're still, the match money will still sit for the grant. So that 250 could still be spent for those 2 crossings. Once the grant is awarded. This was the 3rd one that was going to have to be paid for by somebody.
Oh, okay.
And so the railroad has come through on their own dime through partnership with the state
Okay.
to cover that. So this is a huge win. And again, Pioneer continues to see active use of this line. They only come into the county once and leave once in the course of the day. The train only moves once throughout the day, but when it moves through, it moves at about 8 miles an hour. And it's very slow and it's very tedious for those involved in the area. But again, rail safety. And again, we're going to talk about rail safety here in a couple minutes. So.
Thank you. That was it.
Yep.
You want to go to Pierce Road?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Pierce Road. Yeah. Pierce Road in your packet a couple months ago, and it's too bad Larry Beeler's not here because Larry Beeler said with any amount of money and a little bit of engineering, anything could be done. Well, the study that we did on Pierce Road, which was a 2-mile corridor that's missing between State Road 331 and Miami Road, or that's been missing since they built the road network in the southern part of the county. Engineering and money could solve the problem, but it's probably not based on the amount of traffic and based on the amount of money it would take to do the work, probably not economically viable to move forward with the project. What they determined, Lawson Fisher did the study, what they determined is the first mile really is a series of bad soils and drainage corridors. So there's three different legal drains that drain through the area, through kind of north to south topography, so the land slopes, so we've got lots of water moving through the corridor. The last mile is really pretty flat. So the last mile could be built, but you still have a mile gap then in that 2-mile corridor. So what we've determined in the short term is that we will do signage. So as you take Pierce Road to Miami, we'll do signage that directs you up to Osborne Road, from Osborne Road east to 331, back down south to Pierce, and help people make that corridor. Because right now you get to either piece and you don't know, do I go left or go right? Where's the better road? So we're going to do signage to make the direction. Now, next year, we're proposing to improve Pierce Road from the interchange at 31 all the way to Miami. And we don't know if part of the reason why traffic counts are so low is because that road is in such miserable shape. And so people just avoid it and they go up to New, or they go to one of the other corridors, or if people would use it and the traffic counts would be higher. So there may be the opportunity to relook at this study once we have better traffic count information on an approved road section. But at this point in time, the determination was it could be done. There's alternative corridors in the area that could be used. There was a rail corridor a little south of the Pierce Road corridor. So there are things that could be used, but at this point in time, it didn't make sense to spend a lot of money to do a study that just didn't seem like it would net anything of value. So Lawson Fisher has completed the study. We will refund, I think, about $32,000 back to the Wyatt EDA. They didn't use the full amount of the study money because the study got to a point, they said, this is where you should stop the study. So we'll have that accounting in the next month's budget.
What put us on that in the first place?
So we had a lot of conversation with Lakeville, just in working with Lakeville. And then even as we talked about regional development with MACOG and some others, we've got so basically the Pierce Road corridor goes all the way from just east of LaPorte all the way into Goshen,
Oh,
except for this 2-mile
Right.
gap. And so you could make this corridor, and then with Potato Creek Inn coming on board and some of these others, if you're in Wakarusa or if you're traveling State Road 19, that would be a logical corridor to come. Again, then you've got this gap. How do you get around that gap? So that's where we are. And
I don't think I've ever driven down here. New or current, that's where you
yeah.
go.
Well, if you have
I've
good
never
shocks on
driven
your
down.
car, I would stay off here.
Probably why I've avoided it.
So you can do it on a bike, but you need the mountain bike for the big object.
Doesn't sound fun.
So,
Like off-roading on a road.
exactly.
I've driven it.
Yeah.
So before you this morning is resolution 2022-06, which is authorizing approval of the redevelopment commission for the project Honeysuckle Development Agreement. Just as a quick reminder, I think it's been top of mind for a lot of people, especially me, over the last couple of months. Project Honeysuckle is a 150 megawatt solar farm that's being proposed out in Olive Township. Approximately 1,000 acres of leased property. So Lightsource will not be owning all of this. They will own a small piece that they'll have to acquire for a substation for the interconnect from the solar farm onto the AEP transmission power lines. So Lightsource is a joint venture between kind of Lightsource and BP, British Petroleum. Current US portfolio has about 2.8 gigawatts in production with up to another 20 gigawatts proposed. This project in particular would be approximately $164 million to construct, with approximately 150 to 200 construction jobs on that for about a year, maybe a little bit more than a year. Expected power generations to start in early 2024. So this development agreement essentially controls the interaction between the county and Lightsource. So it's got some language regarding how we set up the EDA. It kind of codifies a little bit in legal terms what that mechanism looked like. And I can go through that just kind of real briefly. During some of our small meetings, we did meet and I kind of went through a little bit more detail, but essentially it would be a single user TIF, a single TIF allocation area, a single user EDA. The development agreement would control this financial incentive. So right now there's money that goes to the schools in year one. So the RDC would vote to approve a check to be written out of this TIF to the New Prairie United School Corporation. And then that increases year over year, I think 10%. Second piece is to allow the base value of the TIF to grow. So that would be, again, a vote for the redevelopment commission every year to allow I think it's 13.2% increase in the base value. So TIF has got base and revenue, right? So again, that then goes to the underlying tax units. Third, in year 11, the RDC will start collecting $250,000 each year just to have infrastructure improvements. If there's roads, if there's paving in that development area. We could also use it for interserving arguments throughout kind of the new Carlisle area as well. And then the remainder of that, whatever's left after that TIF revenue, would then go back to the developer as the financial incentive. That's the incentive piece of this. And then that's every year a certain percentage goes in. Additionally, in this development agreement, you also have a decommissioning agreement, which is required by St. Joseph County zoning ordinance. So that kind of codifies how once it gets to the end of its lifespan, how we decommission, how we get everything out of the ground. Again, things are being put into the ground. The farmland will then be allowed time to regenerate over the course of the 30 to 35-year lifespan. So it is kind of, it's farming something different. You know, it's farming sun. Overall, that's kind of the gist of it. And we've got Darren Jacobs on the call. He's been our contact with Lightsource BP if there's any questions. So right now we are requesting approval of this development agreement to move this project forward. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer, and then Darren's also available.
Real quick, reading it today, the $3 million that the county would get when this whole transaction or agreement is reached, would that offset the expenditures in Fund 4302? Would that just go to the county?
So there's two subsets to this. So once the development agreement is approved, there's actually a $250,000 kind of professional fee, and that would cover a lot of the work that's done by our council, by bond counsel. So Philip Facenda has been contracted to do the bond work for the economic development area and the TIF. So it would cover kind of those professional services as we move forward. $3 million once the project is constructed and generating power will actually go straight to the county council. So it'll go into the general fund and then could be used for projects, you know, throughout the county.
And then in year 11, when the RDC would get $250,000 a year until the end, that would go into our general fund, most likely.
It would be, I believe, to the actual TIF. So it wouldn't go to the general, it'd go to the EDA. So the RDC would control the honeysuckle TIF is what we're probably going to call it. So the money would go into that account.
So Chris, we rescheduled our redevelopment meetings twice with the intention that the county council was going to move on this development agreement and then we would take action afterwards. But this was pulled from the agenda 2 days ago and they have not approved this development agreement yet. So I guess, you know, what's the reasoning then behind us taking action today?
So I guess from our side, and Phil can kind of speak on that, there is no kind of order really that things needed to be approved at. I think we always envisioned, you know, at the first schedule was to have the county council be the approving, the first, RDC second, BOC third. There's nothing statutorily, to my knowledge, that says we have to do it that way. I think for us, you know, once it got tabled kind of that second time, we're looking at timelines along with Lightsource to understand, okay, how can we streamline, how can we move this project forward? Because we're getting into this area where if we delayed any further, we're pushing the EDA, which is a 2-month process, into August at that point. And so you really start constraining the amount of time that we have to actually get the project under construction in the fall. And Darren can speak a little bit more about kind of, you know, what their timelines look like, but we were always on a truncated timeline. And then with that delay, the choice was made to, you know, okay, let's see if we can move everything else forward so that we're able to, you know, kind of keep our schedule right now as much as we can. And then, you know, once some of the negotiations and Darren can speak upon some of the labor discussions that kind of led to the tabling on Tuesday. At least we're trying to move things forward as fast as we possibly can.
Timelines make sense, for sure. If there were changes made to this after we were to take action today, would we have to then take
Then we would have
action
to
again?
take further action on those changes.
Because it's my understanding that it was tabled because they weren't satisfied yet with where it stood. I guess that's my assumption.
I think from the
They weren't
development
ready to
agreement,
vote. They weren't ready to vote.
Yes, I don't know if they weren't satisfied with the development agreement or other issues related there too. But yes, if changes were made to the development agreement, we would have to reconsider and vote again on those changes.
I did speak with the commissioner last night. I believe they intend to address this at their meeting today as well. So they're also moving forward for whatever that's worth.
They're going to address that today. today, or is that? next?
They're actually gonna address that next Tuesday.
Oh, next
We're
Tuesday,
usually
I'm
on
sorry, their
Tuesdays,
next
so I-
meeting, we're
yeah.
typically, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, my fault. Next Tuesday. Are there any other questions?
I don't have any questions, but I mean, I support the budget. I think the numbers make sense. I just don't think it makes sense to take action today if all three entities aren't on agreement with the development agreement. So I would make a motion that we table this until our next meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to table this. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Gillian, how do you vote? No. Mr. Baxmeyer, how do you vote?
No.
Mr. Critchlow, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Gripe, how do you vote?
Yes,
And Mr. Jordan, how do you vote?
No.
The motion fails.
Is there a motion to approve this agreement?
Would be a motion to approve the development agreement.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Gillian, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Baxmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Critchlow?
No.
Mr. Gripe?
yes.
And Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Roger's here.
Yeah, I hate following $160 million project with a $72,000 professional services proposal, but we're gonna do it anyway. Before you today is under the AM General Economic Development area is a professional service proposal entitled Hazard Elimination and Mobility Study for the Ash Road and Lincoln Way Corridor. It's a professional service proposal from Avon Merce Consultants that was identified within the County Connection Study that was completed in 2021. The County Connection Study was a study from Capitol Avenue over to State Road 19, from the railroad tracks or Lincoln Way area all the way north to the toll road. It was a joint county study on mobility and movement through that whole corridor. Again, this study was identified within that report. The objective of this study is to analyze mobility and safety in the Osceola area and specifically consider the impacts and hazards associated with numerous at-grade railroad crossings within the Osceola area. And really, this study will carry all the way from the Robert Young Yard, so right at Ash Road County line, all the way west to Capitol Avenue. So to look at the Mishawaka crossings as well. There's 4 crossings, I believe, in the Mishawaka area city limits in this corridor. Between blockages, safety issues, and just mobility issues, this is the concept behind this study is to look at those key principles, but also as well look at the opportunity for an over or underpass in the Ash Road corridor, and also look at opportunities to connect the Lincoln Way corridor using Beach Road to the US 20 bypass. When the bypass was originally built, the state of Indiana bought and cleared land for an interchange at Beach and the bypass. So this will also then look at the opportunity to put in an interchange at that point. The area between State Road 19 and Capitol Avenue is a long stretch, 12-mile stretch of the bypass that doesn't have an interchange. So this would be, or I guess it's 7.5 miles apart, but this would put an interchange right at that point, which is about the average spacing of interchanges along the bypass corridor. So we look at this from mobility, we look at this from safety, we look at this from economic development. There's a picture at the end of the packet, not that I go by every sign that Mr. G's puts out, but they are kind of the reasonable voice of Osceola governance. But this is one that was up late last year, I believe, when infrastructure money was coming out. So it just points to the fact that there's a lot of interest and a lot of conversation about this. There was Tuesday night a conversation at the town council meeting in Osceola about working with Norfolk Southern to close the crossing at Chestnut Street. So there is already conversation happening in the town of Osceola about mobility and safety in that corridor. But this is a study, again, that we think is timely. It's timely as it relates to the comp plan from a mobility standpoint. It really feeds into a lot of the things that the comp plan is looking at. So much like the Pierce Road study, we had to do to make a decision if it made sense to spend a lot of time and energy on something. This study will help us inform conversations about overpasses, underpasses, and connectivity to the bypass. While we don't typically allow testimony and those in favor to speak on a matter, this one's a little different, again, from based on kind of a historical perspective of this area. Senator Rogers is here. Senator Rogers has been a kind of a driving force to have some conversation about this corridor. And if the redevelopment commission would entertain her comments, I would ask you to entertain her comments.
We need a motion to allow public comment.
We should do a motion, yes.
Make such a motion.
There's a second.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Gilliam,
Yes.
Mr. Backmeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Gripe? Mr. Gripe,
Sorry, aye.
could you turn your video on, please, Mr. Gripe, and give your eye again?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Critchlow, did I call you already?
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. I'm not sure where you want me, but good morning, everyone. I'm Linda Rogers, and I represent Senate District Number 11. And as a senator, my job is to advocate for the people of the community. And the great folks in Osceola have contacted me, and I've met with them on multiple occasions to discuss what is going on in Osceola. And there's very dangerous conditions going on. If any of you travel that road frequently, you understand it. You've got a main thoroughfare between Mishawaka and Elkhart that parallels a number of railroad tracks. Well over 100 trains go back and forth every day. And not only do they go back and forth, they will stop and really block almost every intersection. So you're left with going between Mishawaka, or you've got to go to Elkhart to get through. And think about when someone has a medical emergency, suffers from cardiac arrest, when minutes count and they cannot cross that track, there could be a loss of life. We also have people that want to cross the track for school, for work. And unfortunately, we had a terrible tragedy happen. And we lost a great young man who all he wanted to do was go to work and be there on time. And so I've spoken very often to the Reeves family who suffered this terrible tragedy, as well as the community that is supporting them in their grief, which will never go away. And we have to keep in mind, it's not if this tragedy will happen again, but when. So we as a community really need to work together to see if we can solve this problem. I can't tell you how much I appreciate Bill Shalio's work in this. He has been wonderful. I reached out to Avonmarsh because I think it was important to know, is there any opportunity to do something? And so as we work together, realize that a study would be the first step in finding a solution. I know the Reeves family is here today. I don't know if you want to give them a minute to speak and support, but again, I urge your support of this study to see if we can find a solution to this really significant problem that faces our entire county. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
If you'd like to make a few comments.
It's a small story that I had written. I'm Stacy, I'm Frankie's mom. Frankie was born at 11:11 a.m. on Saturday, June the 17th, 1995. He was a perfect baby boy, weighing in at 6 pounds, 12 ounces and 20 1/4 inches long. This was one of the most exciting and scariest days of our lives. Followed right behind him at 11:15 was his twin sister, Heather. On the morning of September 5th, 2018, at the age of 23, our boy was taken from us at 4:27 a.m. On that horrible morning, about 4:50 a.m., I was still sleeping when a message went off on my phone. It was one of the wives of Frankie's friend and coworker. She wanted to know if there was a number to reach Frankie. He wasn't at work and it wasn't like him to be late. I tried to call his phone, no answer, so I checked his location and it showed that he was up and awake around 4 o'clock a.m. I then messaged the friend and told them he was up, probably just running late, and to let me know if they hear from him. About 15 minutes later, she messaged me again, letting me know he still hadn't made it to work. Told her I was going to his house to check on him. On my way there, there were a lot of police, fire trucks, EMTs right past the county line with Lincoln Way blocked. I thought there was an accident on the road. I was relieved knowing that he did not take that route. When I drove down the hill at his house, his truck was gone and his porch light was on. My heart sank at that minute in instant anxiety. I called his dad at work to let him know I had a bad feeling. Said a couple of Frankie's coworkers had also called him that morning. He was leaving work and coming right home. I let him know that there was an accident on Lincoln Way, but Frankie didn't go that way. Frankie took Mishawaka Road home, and when he saw the train stopped, he knew it wasn't good. By this time, about 5:30 a.m., several of us were at the Ash Road Lincoln Way gas station talking to an officer. He couldn't confirm a name, but he can confirm it was a black F-150 exactly that had been hit, exactly what our boy drove. We were told to go home and wait for an officer to come if it was him. By this time, our yard was full of people, friends, family, neighbors. The police later came around 8:30 a.m. to confirm. I cannot tell you anything that happened that day or a very long time after. Our hearts had been shattered into a million pieces. Something we thought would never happen to our family. That kind of stuff never happens to us, only to others. We later found out that there had been an early bird train going into the yard, meaning it had left Chicago before it was scheduled to. So it traveled 15 miles per hour all the way and had every crossing in Osceola blocked for over 20 minutes. Frankie's friends, who also go to work early, saw him going through Osceola to see if there was a clear track. As soon as that train finally cleared, Frankie made a horrible split-second decision to get around that gate, not seeing another train traveling 60 miles per hour. That train hit him and his truck blew up. We would never ever see our son again. Frankie was a very friendly, outgoing, lovable, and hardworking guy. Started with Steel Hardware, 16 years old, and went on to work at Forest River and then Newmar. The boy was not afraid to work. He had already purchased his first house at the age of 20 and was saving for a house on the river. Frankie loved his family and his friends and was not afraid to say so or give his big armpit hugs. He loved his older sister Whitney and her husband and was excited to meet his first niece in December. He also spent a lot of time with his twin sister Heather and her husband. Frankie had so many friends, he loved everyone. He was friends with them all. He literally knew the whole town of Osceola. And if he didn't know you, he would introduce himself and start a conversation. The moral of my story is we have lived in Osceola for 26 years. The slow train, one-stop train, every crossing in Osceola block for hours has only gotten worse. I truly believe had there been an overpass or an underpass that day, my son would still be with us. Let's not let this story happen to another family. Thank you for listening.
Taking Lincolnway every day, there has been a increase in a number of trains that have stopped. I mean, I've noticed it several times a week when I'm coming and going. And it is not unusual for a stop train to get passed by a train moving at a high rate of speed. And like everyone, including your son, I'll try to pick the road that I can get across because the train hasn't reached it. I'm not unique, so I'm certainly not. I'm quite saddened for that, but I tell you, it's not an unusual occurrence. So,
Has it gotten worse? And do we know why?
So a lot of it is just an increase in rail traffic. So it is the major yard between Chicago and, for separation yard. I would say if we were in Elkhart County having this conversation, they would say that the rail into the yard on the east side is probably as bad as it's ever been. So this is something that won't go away. It's only as rail traffic gets more active, it's probably going to be a higher issue for the corridor. So
How quickly could the study be done?
so this is a study, they estimate that it's going to take 3 to 4 months to complete the high level study. We're at a time now where there's just unprecedented levels of infrastructure money on the table. So if there's ever funding, this would be a time to go after some of that money. We have had conversations with Norfolk Southern. They're very excited about being a partner in the study. City of Mishawaka is willing to be a conversation or a member of this study, as is Osceola. So I think this is an opportunity to get a lot of people at the table to have a conversation about this. And just because sometimes it comes up, the reason we selected Avonmarsh, not only did they do the county connection study, they have the remaining engineer that was involved in the bypass design working for them, Roger Norat. Roger was involved and actually helped design the interchange. And so he's still working. Well, when he's not fishing or golfing, he's working. So there was a lot of reasons why we selected Avonmarsh as the consultant for this, but we feel that this is, again, very timely study to get done. So.
I don't have data, but I go up there, I have friends who live up there. There seems like there's a lot of new housing construction in that sort of Mishawaka, Osceola.
The Jimtown school area, there's a lot of growth in the Jimtown area, a lot of industrial developments in that area.
So the idea is this could get worse.
Yes, and doing something here with an overpass or underpass or whatever ends up being the determination could be a huge win for development in that whole region.
How
So
about reducing that interaction between
Sure. Train and car.
train and car?
That's ma'am.
I forgot to mention, I do have a petition with over 1,500 signatures for,
Any other comments or questions?
I was just wondering what Senator Rogers, so I assume then you'd be taking that message to the state, talking about whatever state funding might be possible and all that.
Exactly. We have to work together as a community, on the local, state and national level to see, as Bill indicated, this is the time that we need to be proactive, look at what's feasible. And at that point, then we can work on securing funding. But we have to do that
First, sure.
yes.
I believe there's been quite an influx in Chrissy. I assume that would be kind of the grant we would be going for from a federal standpoint, and they've gotten a huge influx from CARES Act and
Yeah.
some of the other federal legislation. So there is quite a bit of money there.
Thank you.
I see the information. I don't see a resolution. Or am I missing it in the packet?
no, there should be a Avonmarsh proposal. Yeah, the total amount of this study is $72,000.
Yeah,
Not to
it's all
exceed.
work plan. I just didn't see a full resolution. That was-
Yeah, no, the
Oh,
proposal.
yeah.
can be approved. Yeah, inside. without a resolution.
Okay, that was my question.
There's no further questions. I move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Gillian,
Yes.
Mr. Baxmeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Critchlow,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Aye.
and Mr. Jordan.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Last thing on the agenda under additional business is the Lakeville North Liberty State Road 4 Trail Feasibility Study. The Redevelopment Commission and NACOG partnered financially to do a study for a trail in this corridor. DLZ was selected to do that work. The study, we had our scoping meeting on Monday for this project, so the project has started. The trail project will be looked at really in two pieces. From North Liberty to Potato Creek and Potato Creek to Lakeville. So that work will get started. They anticipate that that'll be done in about 3 months, which will put us in perfect timing to apply for Next Level Trails grant. The county did not apply for Next Level Trails grant in the last grant cycle, as we were encouraged to do that, make application this fall with the upcoming round. With utilities being installed Potato Creek Inn by the state and their support of a trail between North Liberty and the inn. There's just a lot of support to apply in this next round. And it was not told that we would win the money, but it was strongly encouraged that we would.
Did say, get Senator Rogers back in here.
Oh, yes. We'll twist her arm. I got a meeting in a couple of minutes and I'm gonna twist a couple more arms. But yes, no, it's an exciting time. So, but that trail study is moving forward and that's a huge piece for us. So. And that is it as far as agenda.
Okay. Is there any additional business before we move to public comment? We will open public comment. Anyone who would like to speak may please give us your name, address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Anyone interested in speaking?
Okay, so I'm going to speak up just so that Shelley can hear me.
Sure.
Deborah Durrell, 21677 Autumn Road, South End. Coming today with 2 pieces of information. Number one, I just wanted to say, my son is out in Denver, sorry. I'm still processing that. So my son is out in Denver. He sends me these little cards. And once in a while, with these little jokes and drawings on back. And so I thought I would share this one today. How do you organize an earth party? You plan it. So just starting with that, I wanted to also share that I got information from the Hoosier Environmental Council that a poll has just been completed in Indiana about public preferences regarding the environment. And I can forward this to those of you who haven't received this yet. And I know some of you are very good at polling kinds of information. So you can check the quality of this poll. But some of the main points are that 92% of Hoosiers say issues involving protecting fish and wildlife habitat, lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands are an important priority to them personally. This sentiment is shared by 86% of Republicans and 97% of Democrats. Hoosiers believe protecting water habitats is more important than landowner and developer rights. By a near 4-to-1 margin, Hoosiers prioritize protecting water sources and habitats over protecting landowner and developer rights. Weakening clean water protections is unpopular across party lines. Nearly 3/4, 72% of Hoosiers would have a less favorable impression of a state legislator who voted to relax wetland protections, including strong majorities Republicans, 64%, Independents, 63%, and Democrats, 86%. Voters want science-based rules and standards to protect Indiana's remaining wetlands. 3/4 of Hoosiers support the state's wetland task force basing new wetland rules and standards on science. Many of you know that we have Matt Mearsman on the wetland task force, and we have been advocating to have him and possibly also Jen Tank come and make a presentation on the work that they are on behalf of St. Joseph County and Midway.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else, would anyone else like to speak in the public comment section? No one. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, Mr. Gillian,
Yes.
Mr. Baxmeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Crislow,
Yes.
Mr. Gripe,
Aye.
and Mr. Jordan.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Now we have the sign stuff. Sorry. No, that's for you.
So I tell you it references a plan and then